Can everybody see my screen? Yes. Ooh. Hello, my name is Jenifer Medina. I am a third-year anthropology major and a first-year recipient to the Mellon Mays Undergraduate Fellowship. I'd first like to acknowledge the fellowship coordinators, my cohort, and my faculty mentor, Dr. Katia Gunther of the Gender and Sexuality Studies Department, for their support and contributions to my project. My research project, exploring participant diversity in the U.S. permaculture movement, investigates the accessibility of learning and practicing permaculture in the U.S. for people from low-income backgrounds and underrepresented sociodemographics. I'd like to briefly acquaint you with permaculture, and I would like to point out that you can scan the QR code on the bottom left hand for a link to a 5-minute video on the principles of permaculture in practice. Permaculture is essentially 3 things. Firstly, it is a grassroots movement focused on achieving self-sufficiency and holistic sustainability. Second, it is a philosophy constituted of the 3 main ethics, and that informs its practice, which are in the center of this image right here. And thirdly, it is a technical practice that falls under the umbrella of agroecology, also known as regenerative agriculture, that utilizes the 12 principles for agricultural and settlement design and techniques such as biomimicry and polycultures to work with nature instead of against it. Permaculture was first conceptualized and evolved into a movement in the late 1970s in Australia. This was when environmentalism was ramping up due to findings of pollution and the depletion of the ozone layer due to pesticides. Environmental concerns have only increased since then, and I can attest that eco-anxiety is a real thing in our struggle for inter- and intra-generational access to clean water, healthy environments, and nutritious food against the backdrop of the climate crisis. Although permaculture is not a household name yet, there is growing interest in it as a way to mitigate and/or adapt to climate change. And as my project title implies, permaculture is also a transnational movement that has made its way over to the United States. And my project focuses on the US for 2 main reasons. There is a lack of case studies and literature on permaculture based in the US, especially anthropological research. The second reason is that for a diverse nation, the permaculture movement in the US is not diversely represented in regards to race or ethnicity. Race is used here as a marker for socioeconomic status associated with race due to historical injustices perpetuated through contemporary structural and institutionalized racism. As you can see in the table to the right, a sociodemographic survey conducted in 2015 informs my study that there is a supermajority of well-educated middle to upper class white men and women who report themselves as permaculturists in the US. This begs the questions: why are white practitioners overly represented in permaculture, and what are the effects of this trend on participation? The main question investigated in this study is, what is the reason or reasons that prevent permaculture from being diversely represented and accessible to the general public? One of the potential effects of a homogenized white leadership is the inaccessibility of dissemination materials for underrepresented participant recruitment. In my research, I would like to interrogate the Permaculture Design Certification, or PDC, course agenda that is the prevalent method by which permaculture is disseminated. The PDC is a training that prepares students for permaculture design. It often involves a minimum of 72-hour instruction, and as you can observe from these examples, the out-of-pocket cost for a PDC runs from hundreds to thousands of dollars, depending on the factors of the instructors of the course, who take a portion for their salary, as well as room and board and materials. It is important to note here that making a profit off of teaching permaculture is contested among members of the movement in and of itself. This discourse relates to the third permaculture ethic, fair share, or the mainstreaming of commons, which is said by critics of the PDC to be misinterpreted and appropriated, proving the existence of patriarchal gatekeeping within the movement that is referred to as spermaculture. That is produced and reproduced by male teachers who have celebrity-like status in the global movement and who control the conversation around it, including that of creating PDC courses and promoting profitable market gardens or permaculture businesses for profit. But I digress. The price and time-intensive structure of the PDC poses a potential accessibility issue. Not to say that the intrinsic value of permaculture education and networking is not worth the investment, but this method of learning permaculture is not widely accessible, especially for a diverse people who may be struggling with circumstances such as food insecurity and homelessness, for example. Another key finding of this survey was that as, was that as the measured social inequality index rose by nation, diverse participant representation dropped as well, contributing to the hypothesis that there may be a correlation between access to material and cultural resources and one's ability to participate in this movement. Based on this, the main hypothesis of this study is that people of color and other minorities have a harder time accessing and practicing permaculture due to the consequences of racism and patriarchal gatekeeping within the movement. My research proposes to investigate the following questions. What are the roles of minority and underrepresented participants of the permaculture movement, and how do they navigate them? And what may their narratives reveal for future research in society? And do they offer qualitative reasonings behind existing US permaculture socio-demographic data? My research utilizes a feminist anthropological approach and situates itself in an understanding of systemic disadvantages that adversely affect the minorities of permaculture that include Black and Indigenous communities, people of color, queer, disabled, immigrant, and poor people. It also recognizes the agency and resiliency of these minority participants who are each faced with differential access to quality education, sound housing, gainful employment, and appropriate medical facilities. As part of the principles of permaculture, diversity is highly valued in the movement, acknowledging that biodiversity and diverse participant inclusivity is the key to resilience, strength, and success. This drives me and empowers me to use my research project as an opportunity to hear from experienced minority participants of permaculture to firstly gain an understanding of how participants gain access into learning and practicing permaculture, the resources that they utilize, and insights into what their roles are and how they navigate them. Secondly, to contribute diverse participant narratives to the sparse anthropological literature on permaculture based in the US. And thirdly, most of all, to become better informed on this disparity and open up the opportunity of curating appropriate toolkits for people of similar backgrounds to ensure their success with permaculture. To reach these goals, my research methodology consists of conducting interviews with a sample of 5 to 15 experienced permaculturists who are a minority in permaculture to offer them an opportunity to have their voices heard at minimum risk for them personally, as well as for society at large to benefit from their experiences. I expect to ask questions such as their perspective on what permaculture is and their role in it, their training and background in permaculture, as well as questions on their opinions and insights on the role of the PDC, making an income off of permaculture, having an online presence as a permaculture practitioner, their vision of permaculture for the future, and most of all, if they experienced any setbacks or obstacles, and if so, if and how they overcame them. A preliminary hypothesis is that community and mutual aid are important hubs for resources and support for minorities in permaculture based on the concept of ethnic enclaves. Other than that, I expect everyone that I interview to have their methods of learning and practicing permaculture that diverges from the PDC and from online-based organizing to more community-based organizing that shows the creativity and resiliency of the human spirit. Right now in my project, I am in the process of making edits to my institutional review board application so that I can move forward with recruitment for interviews this spring and this summer. I plan to recruit study participants directly and indirectly through a hybrid of social media and the snowball method. I invite you to reach out with any comments or questions. And I have a website for recruitment in case anyone happens to know someone who would like to contribute to my project or would just like to learn more about it. Thank you very much for listening.
Great, thank you very much.